Well, I'll dig that out afterwards because I've got it on my laptop.
There's a big story that runs about it, and it's published on the first, May 28th to 29th.
Not even the...
It's obvious, John, that they're giving the poor quality so they don't compromise their flexibility in the way
Oh, yeah.
they make things come.
Oh, I'll come to that. Now, this memorial edition, which is really... And some people think, in fact, it's been sometimes quoted... in fact, you quote the article by Paul Mandel as being in that one, but it's in this one.
Correct. Oh, that's
Yeah, so you've got to fix that best evidence. It's just got that little... It's like on page 10,057 or something as a footnote. Second best evidence. No, it's really... I've got the whole... It's fantastic. This is a weird edition, I've got to say, for a start. You want that out of the plastic? It has the... You can recognise it because it has the cut-down version of the same portrait. It is completely... to do with the assassination, no advertisements or anything. And I believed it was taken from that first edition material, plus what was in... Well, there must have been one a week after that, because there was one that showed the funeral, was there? Or was that just in this? But that doesn't show the funeral. That stops at Ruby shooting Oswald. Doesn't show any of the funeral, which is why it was probably published on Sunday. This one comes out with all the funeral stuff and a lot of stuff in there, and colour images. Now, it's very hard to refer to things in this in this edition because there are no page numbers and there's no date. And I only even was sure it was 1963 because it was copyright 1963 Time Incorporated.
It's been reissued a number of times.
It's been reissued, but I think I got the original. I think David's is the original. Yeah, and I've got one which has got the original postage sticker, I think. Very strange. No date and no page numbers. I said 2 weeks later. I suspected there was one the week after and one the week after that, so I was thinking December 13. We can look at that. Now, again, I had a very nice image scanned in, and I should be able to just show you live one of the in fact, two of the... I don't want to damage this. This one's pretty clear, and this one's very clear. In fact, yes. Thank you, David. Just as a digression, I hope I'm going to go over time now. This...
You have a half hour max to talk to me a couple of questions.
Okay. I'm just going to go out of shot for a moment, David. Look familiar? This film strip shown on the front of the MPI image of an assassination that looks like the film strip of the original film. I saw it in the Conspiracy Museum the other day, or the 6th floor museum, and I thought I've seen that image just very recently. And in fact, that is not frames of the film. That's the same image repeated over and over, and it's not even MPI's image. It's the Life magazine image. So MPI did such a poor job they didn't even put their own version on the front cover of their own DVD and video. They repeated the Life image 4 times as if it was a film strip, because it's the only good image you can get. You want a clear image, you don't go to MPI, you go back to Life magazine, if you can still find them. They're quite expensive, so I want to be careful with these. That one is the other very clear one. That's why I was very glad that David brought it along, because that's on the cover. This one is the one I'm actually going to talk about right now, which you can see up on the screen. It comes out a little bit, well, a little bit more colourful when you look at it like that. The one on the front cover of the MPI is like this one. It's an amazingly good frame, remarkably good frame. In fact, impossibly good frame, because everything is sharp. Everything is sharp. Sharp? Sharp. Okay, I can't say it with an American accent, I'm afraid. It's sharp. Everything, you're going to have to get used to the accent. Everything is in focus. And as is the other image, which appears on the front cover because it's so good. These little point light highlight, we saw them before when we did the sign overlay, and you saw that little block, that little point in the bushes, I don't know, flower or bud or overlaid. There's a lot of those little blop, 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 blops, whatever they are. I don't really care what they are, but they're there. You can see them in many frames. And look at this sharpness. In fact, that's, you know, this is the beginning of the story of what actually happened. There, look. And looking at him, and this is, and this guy with his doing that. At the other frames it changes to a wave actually, but the first version that was published it was a V. Or a 2. Well, I don't know. Is it Winston Churchill or something? I don't know. That's.
What do you think the guy is doing?
I don't know. I don't really care what he's doing, but it's just interesting that in this one image it looks like he's putting a V up. If he's a, is he a signal man? I don't know if he's, is he the signal man or one of the signal men? Anyway. Yeah, well, it's a V. V means something. I don't know. Five more shots. Roman numerals. 5 more shots, please. Yeah.
Yeah, the second ball.
That's not the point of this frame. Right. This sharp, beautiful, fantastic for publication. I can see why Life chose this frame, because these guys, see the guy looking up the street and his mate looking up the street, and he's in the process of going, oh, where's the president? Look at the weird. And this beautiful. Impossibly beautiful. Well, I'll show you in a moment. You'll have to take a little bit of my word for it, but the limo travels this distance during the exposure of this frame. The limo travels this distance, and I'll show you. I won't just state that to you, I'll demonstrate it to you. This is a real spot in the bush because you see it in a number of frames. It's not just a bit of speck of dust in Life magazine. This is a real spot in the limo, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But apart from that, there are so many sharp, I mean, you look at this, you can examine it right there afterwards. Well, flag can wave, so it could be going backwards at the same velocity the car's going forward, so I wouldn't like to take the flag. But things that are fixed to the limo or the motorcycle, look at that sharpness there, look at the tree, the edge, it's all, I don't know, does that tree have those sort of leaves? I mean, if they're real leaves, I mean, that's amazingly sharp. But that point and that point, of course, if the limo travels that much during the exposure, well, you can either stand there with your camera and the limo will be blurred by that much. Everything should be blurred by that much. That should be blurred by that much, blurred. That'll be a line. That'll have blurred. That'll have tails on it, like a comet. Even the edge of the umbrella. There's the umbrella man. There he is.
But he has a camera or something.
Well, no, hang on. There's a few possibilities. If you stand stationary, the limo will be blurred. If you pan perfectly with the limousine, he will be sharp. This guy will be blurred. That'll be blurred. That'll be blurred. These holes are a little bit blurry, so I'm not going to count those. But all the background should be blurred. All the background is not moving should be blurred by this amount. And the limousine will be sharp. If he half pans, so he pans at half the speed of the limousine will be blurred by half that amount, the background will be blurred by half that amount. If he also blurs up and down, you can get a big blur of the limousine and a big blur of the background. You can get bigger blurs. The minimum blur is this. You have to share that amount of blur between this guy and this guy. That's the laws of physics. If it's taken through Zapruder's camera. Okay? Now let's just...
So before you do that, one flag...
It'll stay up for a little while. Huh?
One flag dropped as if there's no motion or anything, and the other flag is extended. And I don't know why it's extended unless there's some wind. But anyway, I just wanted to...
No, but flags can get caught up on themselves. It's wrapped, sort of stuck. I don't know. I'm not going to use the flags. I'm going to use things that are solid objects. That's going to stay for a couple of frames anyway. Impossible. There you go. That was pretty dramatic, wasn't it?
What frame number would that be?
It's well, I'm going to show you here. He's good. He's good. I'm saying by the Warren Commission because this was done, as David Healy said, for the Warren Commission. This whole thing was created for the Warren Commission. This is basically, the middle frames of the film were locked in by the time they put their exhibits out. And presumably they saw it, or some version of it, in February '64. So this is what I'm going to call that. This is actually from the MPI disc. You can actually notice it's not as clear as what I just showed you. Yeah, you want clear photos. For the front cover of the MPI video, you go to Life magazine. Here's some little, it's 231, 232, 233. So I'm showing you 231, 2, 3, 2, 1. And I've just rotated them and moved them so that the background is the tree and the bushes and the holes and everything is all. I didn't even do a perspective. The perspective is so small to correct. No, I'll come to that. Just hold your horses. Okay. Not going to be stable enough for that. Let's all right. I put my finger sort of on the edge of the wheel in the middle frame, 232, which is the one we're looking at. And you can see there how much the edge of the wheel moves in one frame, that much. There's a Zapruder camera, and I want to open it up so I can verify. When you look at the way it works, it's about 45% of each frame period the camera's open for. So it's just less than half. That's that amount that I showed you before here, which is half of that movement from frame to frame. So in one frame period, the limo moves from here to here. Each exposure is open for 45% of the time. 55% of the time, the shutter's closed. Okay? I'm saying that's a real spot in the bush. You can, in fact, if you've got better copies of the frames, you'll verify that this is a real spot in the bush, according to the frames that we have. And I'm saying that's a real spot on the limo. It's not just a piece of dirt. The bush I saw in various frames. The spot on the limo I was worried about because it was less clear in the MPI frames. Again, MPI, worse quality. And being a car, if it was a reflection of something else, I couldn't use the motion of the car as being the motion of the reflection. It would be the motion of the reflected object that would be relevant, a bit of a physics technicality. So I thought to myself, what could I... There must be some other photo showing me that spot on the side of the car. And I was looking at my bookshelf and looking at the books and trying to figure out where can I find that that spot on the side of the car. And well, I didn't have to look too far. I just had to find the front covers of a couple of books, and the spot's there. It's probably the keyhole. I don't know if they locked the presidential limousine, but it's there. That's from the Zapruder film, but that's from something else. And that's the little advertisement that goes. Any who hasn't bought the books, of course, you must buy the books and buy more copies of the books and give them to your friends. And there are some excellent authors in those books. Okay, so that spot is a real spot in the car. It's the keyhole, I think, whatever it is. I don't care what it is. It's keyhole? Yeah, keyhole. Bit of light humour there. How can there be no blur? Now, de-blurring is impossible in 1963. I mean, I started off de-blurring frames, so I know how hard it is. You need today's computers, which computers in 1963 were the equivalent not even of a calculator, they're equivalent of a toaster. Computers that we have in 1963, and this is very computer intensive. To de-blur some of those frames, I leave the thing running overnight if it's large enough. So there's no possible way you can start with a blurred frame and de-blur it in 1963. All right. Now you start getting to the thought, either camera running faster or you have the limo going slower. Because the motion of the limo from 231 to 232 to 233 does not work. Okay? As you said, it's either stopped, which means you've deleted a whole lot of frames to make it look like it's moving, or, where I say that? This is the problem though. my first project was to do the blurring. And so I know how much blur there is, and in fact there was another researcher that had done a study of the blur in each frame and trying to match it up between frames and in each frame as to Zapruder's tracking error. And so I know inside out how much blur there is in each frame, and 99.9% of the time, or maybe 99% of the time maybe, all the frames have the correct blurring, including, who mentioned it? Did you mention it? You mentioned it, 302 and 303. I'm working off the MPI copies, and if I got your copies, I may well find that 302 and 303 are incorrect. That's one reason for having MPI so blurry, so we can't do those sort of measurements. Okay? But within tolerances, within uncertainties, scientific uncertainty if you like, 302 and 303 are consistent, because in one of them he's panning too fast, so the limo's a little bit blurred and the background's a lot blurred. In the other one he's panning a little bit too slow, so the limo's blurred that way and the background's blurred a little bit that way, which looks sharp, because there's no sharp objects on Mary Moorman and Jean Hill. It's the sharpest frame of them we have, but it's still a little bit blurred. But if I get a sharper one, like if you find an old copy of Life magazine, you find out what it was before MPI got their hands on it and did so much to it that it was useless in terms of evidence. The MPI version is useless.
Well, the lifting frames might be sufficient.
Yeah, well, but most of the other frames are correct. Okay, you pick 100 frames, they'll all be correct. Most objects in most frames. There's 486 frames with a whole heap of objects in there, and I haven't analysed every single object in every single frame, because I'd be as old as Jack if I'd done all that before I came and spoke to you. But, sorry Jack. Is that ageist or something? Discriminatory? You can't check everything, but everyone I've checked works out perfectly for Zapruder's camera. The motion of the limo in one frame, take 45% of that, and the blurs add up to that. In fact, as vectors. Like Weatherly's blur analysis, vector analysis, he didn't do it right because he was making assumptions about what was between the frames, which you can't do, because the Nyquist frequency's high enough, you can move between frames. But within one frame, as vectors, the blurs always add up as vectors within one frame, 99% of the time. Right? That's a bit of mathematically describing here what was going on, but all of the frames mathematically are perfect. Now, the frames we have now. So you have this idea. If frame 232 from Life were obtained by frame deletion, most of the other ones would need to have the blur introduced into them. Right? It's all well and good to say that the camera is running at 48 frames per second, and even at 48 I think it's still not blurry enough, but if it was 48 frames per second, you've deleted every other frame, or it was moving a lot slower and you've deleted frames, then you've got to put the blur back into the other 485 frames. How hard is it to introduce blur? Well, you can probably blur them, can't you? Just sort of jiggle it around while you're rephotographing it. The moving objects and the stationary objects have to be separately cut out. David Healy's just told you exactly how you do that. You mask them out. You can do it, no problems. You cut out the moving objects, you cut out the stationary objects, you blur each of them. So when you're exposing it, now I'm thinking not so much here in terms of film optical printers, but in terms of just normal photographic equipment, you just have a little wheel which moves it along a little bit, and as you're exposing, you do a long exposure, a low intensity, long exposure, you wheel it along as you do it. You get a blur. So that's not too hard to do. Then you've got to paste them back together. David Healy explains how you paste them back together. You could do it. Except